I'm glad you asked, Doug. This is a Chicago White Sox hat done up in Chicago Bulls colors. So it's a little bit of a throwback. It kind of looks like the jersey that one Michael Air Jordan wore his rookie season in Chicago. I also have like a Last Dance type shirt on. That's the Scottie Pippen quote. I'm not gonna F my summer up. If you remember that quote from the Last Dance documentary.
I did. Did we ever get a new version of the Last Dance documentary? Because I know that the first version was kind of rushed because of the pandemic and they wanted to get that out to the people. Did we ever get a finished version of that?
I think it's considered finished, but there is a DVD. I mean, there's a box set you can buy, and of course,
a DVD.
The box set has
a digital video disc,
a laser disc. Yeah, there's a box set you could get that has a bunch more stuff on it. I have it. I have not watched it yet.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll watch it after we do this show. Welcome to This Is Not a Serious Hornets podcast. I'm Doug Branson. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and my co-host. Friend first, co-host second, David Walker. How you doing, David?
Thanks, buddy. I'll be honest. I've been better. It's been a rough couple of days in the sporting world. We can get to that, but everything else is good.
Yeah, I think tough week for Carolina sports in general. Tougher week, I think, for the Hornets because the big news they have lost Lamello Ball for a significant period of time due to a fractured wrist. We got that injury news. It felt sort of out of nowhere, right? Like it didn't feel like. I didn't feel like after that game against the Clippers that we had much to worry about, but maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention. Oh, David is frozen. We've got our first freeze of the podcast. Okay, we'll try to get David back in here. While we're waiting to see if we can get David back in here, I will tell you that This Is Not a Serious Hornets podcast is a listener-supported show. That's right. You make this show happen, and you can support us by signing up at patreon.com/HornetsPod to help us keep making this show for you every week. And some people have been supporting this podcast for a long time, whether it be this podcast or the Locked On Hornets podcast. And I know a lot of you have been listening since our days as Hive Talk Live, those many years ago. So I wanted to shout out, and I will do this over the next couple of weeks, the people that have been with us, starting with the people that have been with us the longest and kind of moving up the chain, while also recognizing the people that have graciously decided to join now that we are doing this podcast. So let's go to the 2017 Club Part 2. I shouted out some of the 2017 Club last week. I saved some for this week. So shout out to Giddles123, shout out to Ethan, Brandon, and Chuck, who have been supporting this podcast since 2017. And every dollar from the Patreon goes to helping us to make this show, whether it be this program that we're using to put us live or the equipment that you see us use every day. And shout out to a newbies. We got Tyler, who became a $3 patron and is encouraging us to keep doing these shows. Also got a comment that I want to shout out. You can comment on our YouTube page. I've got a YouTube page that is sort of serving as the home for this podcast initially, and then we'll be moving that to its own channel soon. But a comment from Daniel saying, "This is awesome stuff." Thank you, Daniel, for the comment. You can comment live if you want. We've got a little chat feed up here that we can check out if you want to watch along live on YouTube. We're doing these consistently at 10 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays. So if you can make room in your calendar for that, you can chat with us live, throw us a question, throw us a comment, or do it on the rewatch on YouTube. So big thanks to Tyler for that. I'm just going to get right into this while we wait on David to get back into the room here. The big news, obviously, Lamello Ball, fractured wrist. It seems like the fracture near his thumb. Still waiting on news. He was going to get a second opinion Still waiting on news on that, but it seems, every indication seems like this is most likely a season-ending injury for Lamello Ball, who was, by all accounts, the front runner for Rookie of the Year and still could win. We should say that. He's played 60% of the games. We have precedent for a player winning Rookie of the Year without playing 80, 90% of the games. So it's not out of the question, although I will say that Anthony Edwards of late, the number 1 overall selection, has been playing very well for Minnesota. And I know this because I picked him up on the fantasy waiver wires in my Locked On League, and he has been scorching hot. But he's inefficient, and he doesn't do a ton except score. He just scores a lot. So I think even if Anthony Edwards continues on his trajectory, unless he just becomes significantly more efficient or starts to do a little bit more in terms of rebounding, in terms of assists, then I think, voters could still give it to Lamello. And I think you also have to have that like awe factor factored in as well, that like so many highlights from Lamello, people were gushing over his performance, his maturity. And I think among voters, what may help Lamello is that there may be this sense that he is just going to be the better player. And so they want to reward him now. Now, whether that's fair or not to do within this Rookie of the Year conversation, I'm sure there will be some, I don't know if it's significant, but there will be some lamentations over the fact that if Lamello wins, he's only played 60% of the games. But he did play more than half. And I think that's something. I would be a little reticent to give it to Lamello if he had only played 40% of the games. Then I think you have to say, okay, I have to give some credence to the player that played more his rookie season. How much of that really matters towards the story of Lamello Ball, the trajectory of Lamello Ball's career? Not that much. Michael Carter-Williams won Rookie of the Year. So, it can all go seriously right or all go seriously wrong from that Rookie of the Year award. But it doesn't have anything to do with winning Rookie of the Year or not winning Rookie of the Year. I think the bigger questions from the Lamello injury, and I wanted to start with this, typically we kind of go game by game, and I do want to get into some of the games with or without David at this point. But I wanted to start with this because, this is what everyone's going to be talking about. It's going to be all figuring out, what happens with Lamello and what this team looks like without Lamello. And I think the big questions for the Hornets, number one, does this change the trade deadline calculus? And for me, I don't know that it really does. The Hornets didn't need another guard. They lose a guard in Lamello. This to me, they still need a big. Cody Zeller looks like he may return in tomorrow's game against Houston, possibly, or maybe later in the week. But even with Cody Zeller in the lineup, it's just clear that the Hornets need something from a big, both offensively and defensively. They need some depth there, and so that doesn't change. Now, what it may change is, they may not go for the sort of one-season player, or a player they don't think they can keep, but they bring him in for 1 year because they feel like they have a legitimate shot at making the second round and possibly further in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And you were starting to feel that sense. This West Coast road trip, I think, dampens some of those thoughts, even before the Lamello injury, but certainly after the Lamello injury. Now, I don't think that a 5 seed may be realistic for the Hornets. I've been saying that all year, but I was saying that under the presumption that everything were to go right. Everything has not gone right, obviously. And so now the calculus changes. So maybe they trade, if they trade at all, they trade for a big who they really feel like they could convince to stay here long term. So is that a John Collins? Is that a Miles Turner? Is that a Vucevic? We'll have to find out the answer, middle of the week this week as the trade deadline looms. But, so I think it does change it somewhat, but not significantly. They're certainly not going to go out and trade for a starting guard because you had Devontae Graham, and now Devontae slides back up into the starting lineup, and generally they have good guard depth on this team. Does this change the playoffs calculus? Well, yes, I think it does. I think, again, this could still be a playoff team. Now the question is, and I think we'll get some answers as they prepare to play a couple of more good teams in the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns. Does this change them from a possible 5, 6, 7 seed to a playoff play-in type of team, or does it knock them out altogether? I don't think it knocks them out altogether because, even before they got lucky with Lamello, I thought this was a team that could compete in the Eastern Conference. And certainly there have been some teams like the Toronto Raptors that have been unable to compete, that have opened up some opportunities that may not have been there in a sort of normal season. So I think the Hornets, in my mind, are still a playoff team. They just are not sort of as solidified as I thought they were with Lamello fully healthy. And, I think this might have some people asking, will this cause the team to completely, fade and try to get some lottery luck again? And honestly, I just don't see that happening. There's too much that has improved with Terry Rozier. Devontae Graham is starting to feel it again. Defensively, they're still a mess, so they're going to lose. They're going to lose games that would keep them from being a legitimate playoff threat, but I don't see them losing enough games to completely fall out of the playoff race in the Eastern Conference, pending, obviously, that they don't have other significant injuries. So it looks like, this is disappointing to me. It looks like we may have lost David for the whole show. I'm going to see if I can get in contact with him, see what's going on. He says he's cranking back up right now, so we'll see if he gets back in. I'm just going to keep it rolling along, and he can join in as we progress forward. But with Lamello gone, you really are losing not only what he did on the floor every night. He was a potential leading scorer every night, and he was facilitating. He was setting up Miles, for those alley-oop dunks. He was setting up Gordon. He was setting up, even they were playing him alongside Devontae, and I think Devontae was benefiting from the fact that Lamello was starting to pull attention, from opposing defenses, and you lose a lot of that, and you lose some of what he was giving you defensively. He was turning the other team over. Now, what I will say is that one thing we were starting to see and needed to see improve from Lamello is that he was turning over the basketball a lot. And so maybe there is some balancing out with, this. Now you slot in Devontae, who's a bit of a veteran. Maybe he doesn't turn the basketball over as much. Maybe this team does see some defensive strides as a result of Lamello having to sit. But on the whole, this is obviously a significant loss for the Charlotte Hornets and a loss for Lamello, who loses the opportunity to really progress further in his rookie campaign. If you have questions about this, definitely hit us up on the chat on YouTube if you're watching along live, or if you're watching or if you're listening to the podcast, go to the YouTube page and chat with us there, or if you're on Patreon, reply in the comments there. But listen, I wanted to start this new segment. I was starting this before Lamello got hurt, but I think I moved it up in the rundown, honestly, because I just thought it would be a tribute to Lamello. I wanted to each week look at because it seemed like it was happening every week that some NBA player or former NBA player was shouting out LaMelo Ball and saying how great he was. So in this segment, NBA players love LaMelo Ball. Here's a tweet from Jared Dudley. So impressed watching Melo tonight. Charlotte got a franchise changer in this kid. Fractured wrist, I don't think changes that story. It's not a broken leg, something that we saw from a sort of a Sean Livingston or or Gordon Hayward. Those are the type of injuries that are career trajectory changing. I don't know that this fractured wrist necessarily is that. So that's good news. I think the franchise can still change because of Lamello Ball. So that's NBA players love Lamello. Let's get into our next segment this week in Hornets. The Hornets played 4 games since we last talked to you, and it was a West Coast road trip. It was against a lot of good teams. We said it was going to be tough. It definitely was. They started off against Denver. Only one player for the Denver Nuggets in this game shot under 50%. This was a tough one all around. I don't have a ton to say about this game. Other than defensively, the Hornets just succumb to great players. And the thing is, Denver can beat you inside. They can beat you outside. They move the basketball incredibly well, and they play defense. So this was, for a Hornets team that was really riding on some good wins, they really kind of got hit in the mouth by a team that can really do a little bit of everything. And that bloop that I just heard may mean that David is back in action. David, are you with us, my friend? All right, we'll see if he can. You just chime in, my friend, when you can hear us, and we'll see if we can get him back in. But back to this Denver game again. Not a ton that really there is to say about this one because it was just a significant blowout. I'm much more interested in this game against the Lakers. It was a 116-105 loss, and honestly, I didn't think that this, and I think maybe David disagreed with me, but I didn't think this was as significant a loss. You had some highlight performances from Lamello Ball, 26 points, did have 6 turnovers, but 7 assists, 5 rebounds, 10 of 18. I mean, just extremely aggressive shooting the basketball, 55% from the field, 40% from 3. And then a good performance from Terry as well, 8 of 19 from the field. That's 42%, 20 points, only 2 turnovers, 3 assists, and 5 rebounds. I thought early on, honestly, that this game was going to turn into a little bit of like Cody Zeller versus LeBron James, which, obviously advantage Hornets on that one. But, I mean, they went to Cody early and often. He finished this game only 2 of 2. Like he only had 2 field goal attempts, but I just felt like he was very active getting to the free throw line, didn't hit any of them. Only finished the game with 4 points, 2 rebounds, only 11 minutes because he was injured in this one. Another injury for Cody. Tough news for him all around this season. He's just one injury after another. But what was interesting to me is that they put Cody Zeller on LeBron James. And my question is, what does that say about the Hornets' options defensively? That you're going up against the Lakers, you're going up against LeBron, and you decide, okay, our best option to win here is to put our center on LeBron. It was never going to go well. Zeller went out, so eventually they had to change a little bit of their calculus. But it says that P.J. Washington, despite having a lot of blocks, he's been a really great help side defender. Is just one-on-one a sieve defensively. It's just not going to go well. I thought first quarter they had great energy, got good looks. The shots weren't going down. The second quarter was a disaster. They kept turning the ball over. The Lakers got out and ran, and it was just no good for the Hornets. And honestly, I thought this was one of the first games where I thought, okay, this team is keying in on Lamello Ball. They want to make an example here. Defensively, they were making him work for everything that he got in the first half, and he really didn't get going until the second half when the Hornets made a run in the third quarter and loosened things up. I thought that's when Lamello was able to make some things happen. But he had a great game. Funny thing that I saw in Staples Center, it was one of the banners that ran, the advertising banners, and it was for calljacob.com injury attorney. And I just thought it was odd that at Staples Center, with the Los Angeles Lakers, that one of the advertisements would be for calljacob.com an injury attorney. Obviously, he has represented many an injury and must have a great winning percentage to have the money to drop to be alongside Pepsi and all of these big companies. But it was just funny to me because it felt so Charlotte, to have, our small market team to have advertisements for injury attorneys within the arena. It was just amazing. Rozier and Montrezl Harrell getting into it. Love to see that intensity from Terry Rozier. He has enough confidence right now for the entire team. And it's honestly, The Lamello Ball news is devastating because of what you felt like you wanted. First of all, just from a purely fan perspective, he was a big reason you watched Hornets games, but he was not the only reason. Okay. We haven't, this was a MIA week for Gordon Hayward and Malik Monk, but Terry Rozier has been there all the way, and he has been fun to watch. And he has enough confidence right now for the entire team, and I think he has enough confidence to propel this team to do some things without LaMelo Ball that maybe, without Terry Rozier, they would not be able to do. And David notes here that they were former Louisville teammates, or at least both ex-Cards. So maybe there's some history there between Rozier and Montrezl Harrell, but they were getting into it, and that was fun to see. Highlight of the first half was P.J. Washington, though, driving, scoring, blocking shots. Again, he's been super aggressive. It's just I don't think they trust him as a one-on-one defender. I got an award to give out. How he do that, that's the award I give out to players that do stuff that I just don't understand on the floor. And this is not an award I've been able to give out to any Hornets in the past couple of years other than Kemba Walker. But I'm giving this one to Miles Bridges, who early in the third quarter catches it in the corner. He drives past LeBron. And I don't know if you remember this play, guys, but he hits like a circus, twisty, bendy layup through contact. I just had no idea how he had the body control and maintained that power and the force there. Let's see. Let's try to bring David back in. David, how are you? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Doug?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
God. All right.
My throat hurts. I need a drink of water.
Don't.
I'm talking for a long time. I'm Cowherd-esque right now.
Well, I won't spoil you, or I won't bore you with what happened to me, but I've been hearing you go. At this point, it's been 15 minutes of your paused voice going. Was it? So that's what I've been doing. So that's if
sweet.
You heard me
you heard it.
that's
a remix.
Yep.
Well, we're talking
sorry,
about.
Folks. Jump back in there, Doug.
Yeah, well, listen, we're talking about this Lakers game. I didn't have much to say on the Denver game. I don't know if you have anything to say on the Denver game.
No, nothing at all. It was horrible. Although, like, talking about those two games together, and I talked about this with Nod and Walker on Locked On Hornets a little bit. If you're measuring where the Hornets are against, like, the best teams in the league, those were not really two good signs to me. So, like, a lot of that came out of that and said, Hornets are not really in that class just yet, obviously.
But I don't know. Yeah, but I thought after those games, like, I didn't need those games to know that. Like, I didn't think that the Hornets were like an elite conference contender.
No, not at all. I think just from the lens of, like, are you going to try and really make something significant happen, like with this roster this year? That's kind of where my mind frame was. It's like, maybe you ride this one out a little bit more. I think you're kind of on the other side of that. But to those, I was like, you're not just going to add something that's going to catapult you to where these teams are. So
yeah.
As far as like a measuring stick, those two games stood out to me.
Honestly, like, I hope that we look back on these LeBron-LaMelo matchups that we'll get in the future, because shortly after the LaMelo news came out, we got the news that LeBron James may miss significant time with a high ankle sprain, may miss the rest of the season. We're just kind of trying to figure out how long he'll be out as well. But I hope we look back on the future LeBron-LaMelo matchups that we have left, like we look at the Kobe-MJ matchups. You remember, we get highlights of those whenever we talk about Kobe going up against MJ in his kind of Wizards years. I hope we look back and go, oh, yeah, that was cool when LaMelo and LeBron, because that means if we look back on those matchups like that, it means that LaMelo Ball has did you go backstage again?
I ducked backstage. We'll give it one more try here, Doug. One more effort.
One more time. All right. So I was talking about LaMelo Ball and LeBron James, looking back on those matchups, hopefully someday like we look back on the Kobe MJ matchups.
It'd be nice, right? It'd be nice to have a significant counterpart on the Hornets side. We've had the Kemba LeBron matchup didn't go that well for anyone except LeBron and whatever team he was on. So yeah, it'd be pretty fun to have LaMelo and LeBron face off a couple more times. I mean, LeBron's going to play for another, I don't know, 25, 30 years, so we should have a few.
I want to talk about Terry Rozier a little bit more because I think what he's done this season has been absurd in terms of his ability to take over a game in the fourth quarter. We'll talk about that more in a moment with the San Antonio game. I just think if the Hornets had more talent, I think we might look at the Terry Rozier addition like we did the Rice or the Mason acquisitions back in the 90s, where you took a player in Glenn Rice and Anthony Mason who had probably had better careers to that point than Terry Rozier had when he came to the Hornets, obviously. But I think we're both examples of sort of given more opportunity, those players really shined. And the reason I say if the Hornets had more talent, because look, Terry Rozier is not in danger of becoming third team All-NBA, much less second or first, like Rice and Mason were able to. But Rice and Mason had better players around them. Like that was a legitimately better team that those two had than Terry Rozier has with him now. But I just think what he's done has been amazing this season.
They also seem like a more fully formed team, right? Like the Hornets were on the cusp of maybe challenging for a deep run into the playoffs with those teams. And maybe this group can get there.
Mm-hmm.
But what Terry's done in the clutch and you know, leading up even to last night against the Spurs, when they need a bucket, he's the guy that absolutely wants to take the shot. They went away from him coming down the stretch last night. And because they got a few more weapons, but I mean, you might be right. Just if they were making a little bit more noise, he might get a little more recognition league wide. But you saw him kind of, you know, if towards the end of the All-Star voting, I mean, he was probably the Hornet that, you know, neither one had a shot, but he was coming on stronger than when Gordon was kind of fading, as long as you're talking about All-Stars. But he's been fantastic. He's been unbelievable. And now every time he does something like that, you see the mention of Mitch and that trade and what they got back. I mean, it's incredible to look back on that and think of that point in time. The disappointment that was felt across Hornets Nation and the league, and how that contract was laughed at, of course.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, as a general manager, you have to, of a small or medium-sized market team, I think you have to come to terms with the fact, and I think Mitch has, that you're going to have to do some things that you believe in and no one else does. And I thought this move was Bob Bassian. You know, Bob Bass, the former general manager of the Hornets in their heyday, and just to take a player, Terry Rozier, who they just believed, if given more opportunity, could rise to the occasion, and has. And so, you know, I think it's been amazing. I think you've seen similar things out of Gordon Hayward, although weirdly this week, when the Hornets were playing some of the most talented teams they've played all season, Gordon Hayward got my back of the milk carton flow award because he was just completely MIA. He barely edged out Malik Monk, who we didn't see much from until San Antonio, till after Lamello is out. And so that was just weird, right? Gordon Hayward just completely disappearing from these significant games.
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing I talked about with the guys Locked On Hornets last Friday. And, you know, you texted me after that, Doug, and it sounded like we were harder on him than maybe intended to be.
Well, I just thought your conversation really wasn't you so much as like Nada bringing up.
No, I know who you're talking about.
Nada brought up this idea that like if you're paying a guy $30 million, you want to see a little bit more about him. And I'm like, oh my God, we're back to like Nick, but like time is a flat circle. This is Nick Batum talk all over again.
And I don't think he was going there necessarily either, but I get what you're saying. Like he wasn't comparing. I would never even compare the two at this point. Gordon's been fantastic for a bulk of the run here, but yeah, in those big games, like I said, when you are up against the best in the league and the Denvers and the LAs, you have to have your main guys, especially who you peg as your main guys, perform as such. I mean, that's or perform. To your point, like he was barely showing up in those games to make an impact, right? So that was the concern. But he bounces back in a big way against the Spurs, and like I don't think it's in danger of being a Batum situation at all. It was just not hopefully, a couple of not very good games for Gordon Hayward. But if the Hornets want to take this group to the next level, he's got to be that guy consistently. And for the most part, he has.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the question that I was going to ask pre Lamello getting injured is like, how significant was Lamello's surprise development? Like how quickly he developed into a player that you were comfortable having taken 18 shots in a game. Like you weren't scared by the fact that a rookie was taking 18 or 19-year-old rookie, no less, was taking 18 shots in this game against LA. Like how much of that surprised, Hayward, surprised Devontae, didn't surprise Terry, but that's the thing. Like to me, the differentiator is Terry Rozier, who has found his shots, found his moments in the midst of Lamello's ascension. And I'm not sure, because Gordon early on, when Lamello was on the bench, was a takeover type offensive player. We saw a few games where he was just like, give me the ball, I'm going to make this happen for the Hornets. And we just haven't seen, I don't think we've seen that since Lamello entered the starting lineup. And so it'll be interesting to see if we get that Gordon again now that Lamello's out, most likely for the season.
It seems like they really like to take advantage of when Gordon can put a smaller guy in the post. Like they did a little bit of that to get him going against the Spurs last night. It seems really effective. But like you think back to that Lakers game, I mean, he missed a bunny. He was missing bad. He was just really off, missing some uncharacteristic shots in that game. So hopefully that's a blip. And I don't know how else to solve the LeBron riddle for the Hornets. It's just unbelievable how much.
I don't think it will be solved. I think he's going to retire,
right.
And that's the only way that it's solved. Is
would the Hornets then retire his number, a la the Heat and Michael Jordan? Would that be another nod? Maybe.
I don't think Michael's going to do that. Something tells me Michael will not.
He took that personal.
I think he's taking it personal all the time, and there's nothing he can do about it. That's the thing. The thing that you have to know that like the thing that burns Michael the most is that he just can't do anything about it. He's putting out the best product that he can put out, and he still can't beat LeBron James with this team. We got a lot coming up. New segment, Content Corner, where David and I are going to discuss a little bit of the TV and the movies we've been catching up on lately. And then the Hornets did win this week. You wouldn't think it, but they did win one of these games this week against San Antonio. We'll get into a recap of that in just a moment. And then we'll look at some data and hand out some awards. But first, here is a recurring segment, one of my favorite segments, No Context, Eric Collins.
You know the original name of those Burnsides?
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Named after a guy, Colonel Burnside, who had that inside of his face. And over the years, it just got changed to sideburns.
How do you know this stuff?
It's kind of like the flutterby. The thing that used to fly in here is a flutterby, but over the years, it got changed to a butterfly. Hey. Not in my family, though. We all call them flutterbys. Terry Rozier.
Kind of like a flyby.
Dell is us all. Man. Oh man, he's the best.
The comic, I know it's no context. I'm not going to give it any context, but I can react to it and just say that they are comic gold. The way there was another moment, that moment was from the San Antonio game, and that beat out what was going to be no context Eric Collins, which was during the Clippers game when Eric just casually called Lou Williams Lemon Pepper Lou.
Yes, that was he had been saving that one. He had been saving that for the road trip for sure. But yeah, he dropped it like it was nothing, like it was an extra wing.
Oh yeah, it was in 50-point font on his notes, bolded. Must get to my Lemon Pepper Lou joke. If you don't know what he was talking about, I will give you some context on that. He was referring to the fact that leading up to the bubble, Lou Williams had to be in like significant quarantine time, missed some of the early bubble because there was footage of him in a strip club in Atlanta. And Lou Williams' excuse for being in the strip club prior to the bubble was that he really loved the lemon pepper wings and he was just there to pick up some takeout. And this club, to his credit, is known for their wings.
Yeah, apparently.
But I think it's also
Everyone had
known
a
for
good
their
laugh.
breast as well.
It's
fair to say.
Hey, I appreciated Eric last night, as I always do every night, but there was a segment during the game, or a moment during the game, when Bismack went to the line for some clutch free throws, and a little
That's
bit out of
scary.
character.
That's scary what you just said. That frightened me.
Well, a little bit out of character for Eric, but it was so perfectly, placed. He just said something to the effect of, "Bismack, here's the first one." And he made it, and there was complete silence. It wasn't dead air. I thought they went off. I thought they'd lost connection for a second. He didn't say anything. Didn't say he made it. He didn't say anything. He did not want to jinx him. I know, that's why he did it. And then right before, Biz got the ball back, he just said, "Another one." And then he missed that one. But it was perfectly timed. It was of the moment. I mean, I was just it was fantastic. And there was no drop in by Dell. They both could feel the weight of that moment all the way back here in Charlotte, because I'm assuming they're still doing those games from Charlotte, right? They're not on the road yet, I don't think.
It points to a couple of things. One, that I really feel like Eric and Dell are some of the most postmodern announcers in the NBA. Like they really sort of comment on announcing more than I think a lot of announcers do, and they work in these weird, and like that's the kind of thing what I just played on the No Context EC. Like that's the kind of thing you would hear at a baseball game. He kind of calls it like a baseball game, and that makes it interesting. And also, I feel like on the West Coast, they get a little wilder on the West Coast. Like they just do some things that I'm like, I don't know that they would do that if it's 7:00 and they know everyone's watching.
I really appreciate how much they do stay on task. They stay on task the game. They for the most part talk about the game. Even the Sideburn story sprung of something from the game. I mean, if you watch any of these tournament games or any college games or any game on ESPN, my God, they do everything but talk about the actual game you're watching. So it's really refreshing to listen to those two, of course.
Well, let's talk about Content Corner. I don't have any I don't have any super music. I could make something up on the fly. It's the Content Corner. Content Corner. It's what we're watching. It's the Content Corner. There you go.
I like that.
David, what are you watching?
So, as I mentioned last week, I'm still watching The Office. I'm kind of going maybe an episode and a half when I find time during the day. End of last week, came upon what some would call the series finale, but it's not. They kept going when spoiler alert, Steve Carell took off in the 6th season, I believe. Towards the end of that, Michael left the show.
I'm a big fan of Late Office. I like, and I know I'm in the minority, but I like Late Office.
Well, someone came at me. I posted that. I was like, I'm about to go to the Michael leaving episode again. That's always a tough one. Everyone is very emotional in that episode. And there's a great book, Doug, oral history of The Office that I read over the summer that's fantastic. Dives into all the key moments of The Office, and they talk about how tough that was and how during those scenes that it was really the actors talking to each other, Krasinski and Carell and stuff like that. But someone on Twitter said, "You mean the series finale, haha." And I was like, I will kind of I defend, especially even the last season of The Office. I think they kind of steered back towards what made them successful. Of course, Carell was not there until the final episode, but I'm with you. I think there's some real problems with the Robert California season. I mean, I love Spader, and I just watched the one where he went through the interview process today, and I can see why they went down that route. I mean, it's so off-putting and strange and creepy.
That's what I'm saying, though. I think that's great. I honestly, I think that Spader saves Late Office because Andy was not compelling enough as a character to carry that series, and that's why they made, I think the casting people, the producers of that show, made an incredibly savvy move by bringing Spader into the show.
Yeah, the Andy version of the manager did not go over well, and I've yet to kind of get to that part here on this rewatch. So I don't have a strong opinion because it's been a while since I saw that stretch, but it's not great, the Andy portion. And I guess I get where they were going to, but I think the move would have been just make Dwight the manager, I guess, or stick with Spader. I don't know. That's never easy. Or just pay Carell any type of money he wanted, I think is the right answer.
Well, that would have been ultimately, yeah. I mean, that's, I think that now that we sort of know the history, that I think, and it's one of the bigger what ifs in TV history is like, what if The Office had gone full bore and paid Steve Carell? What would the series have turned into? And it may have ended a season early. Right? We don't know. I mean, they may have just done all the stories.
Rolling new employees in, rolling old ones out. They kind of got close to that with some of the younger employees they brought in on the very final episodes. Could they have kept it going? Could it have been like an ER situation where you just
a Grey's Anatomy? That show's been on for 40 years.
Exactly.
They've killed almost everyone from the original series.
And it's still, Doug, it's still like the highest rated show on ABC.
Oh, yeah.
It's still the best one. And I haven't seen an episode in probably 15 years.
Right, but no. I mean, my producer, Katie, she watches it. And so, if you're married, you most likely understand that if your wife watches something or your husband watches something, that you're probably going to end up watching it at some point. And so, yeah, Grey's Anatomy, they've killed everyone. But not many shows can pull that off.
Not Meredith. True.
They're working on it. Spoiler alert. I don't know. It seems like she's kind of touch and go right now. She's got COVID, and
oh, really?
Yeah, that's the newest story.
See, they can steer into that now too. They're in a hospital, right? So they just put masks on everyone and keep cranking them out.
Yeah, or a lot of them are wearing hazmat suits. But yeah, she's sort of in purgatory right now. She much like Lamello Ball right now. She's just sitting on a beach waiting to find out what ultimately her story turns out to be. So, and that's just one of the similarities between Meredith Grey and Lamello Ball, which I'll get into in the episodes as we continue.
Well, so I'm still continuing on The Office. I did see the first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. Doug, now did you watch WandaVision? I know you were going through a big time Marvel MCU just complete consumption watch from start to finish.
Yeah, this was a pandemic because I'm sort of against how many movies Marvel put out. I just got tired of it, and I would only go to see the ones that were critically acclaimed because I just don't have time in the pre-pandemic world to watch all of these damn movies that they keep making. But since we're, coming up to the end, I thought, well, we need to do one more thing that we probably wouldn't do normally. And so we watched all of the Marvel movies. I've got a definitive ranking that I'll put on the Patreon page. So I did watch WandaVision, and I've watched Falcon and Winter Soldier episode 1, which I thought was really well done. Like I'm interested in really more what the show is. Is it going to be a buddy cop? Is it going to be a thriller mystery show? Is it going to be some hybrid of the two? I'm probably more interested in like that than the actual characters. Although I love Falcon even more than the Winter Soldier.
Really, you're a Falcon guy? Yeah, I think they're definitely going for international buddy cop show, right? And this was
Rush. I think Rush Hour was a big guide from what I read to the show.
And we haven't even gotten into that. I mean, if you haven't watched the first episode, they're not really together.
They haven't buddied yet,
fighting crime,
much less copped.
Buddied up. No, exactly. But this show was supposed to come out before WandaVision, and I think through the pandemic stuff and filming and release, they swapped those two out. So. I don't know if that had any effect on kind of the overall, like the macro level, the macro view of whatever the MCU is now. But it's interesting the way they roll that out. This is much more in line with what you would expect to see if you did go to a theater and saw a Marvel superhero movie.
Well, those two things have fused. I mean, even watching WandaVision and then this pilot, I mean, the pilot action scenes. Now, how much of this can they do over the course of the series with the money they have is a question. But the opening scene of Falcon and Winter Soldier is a movie. Like I wouldn't be surprised. And I've
Looks
watched
like
all the movies
yeah.
now, so I can say this definitively. Like that was was film quality. And because Disney is behind all of this, they've got the money. And so the only thing separating TV and film in terms of quality, it wasn't like the level of talent. It was always just like, we're not going to spend as much on a big budget movie as we are on a television series. And so now you're starting to see those two things fuse.
Well, so that's interesting. Another book I read, Doug, and maybe we'll do book corner one day, but it was called The Big Picture. I don't know if you've heard of this book, but it's basically the fight for the future of movies, right? And it's all centered around when studios went full on franchise or nothing. And of course, Marvel plays a big role in that. And there's a lot of different philosophies talked about in there, but one of the philosophies, I don't know for sure if it was Ted Sarandos of Netflix, but it sounds like something he would say, is basically, one philosophy is movies or TV or movies. And like you said, his or whomever said this, I don't want to misquote him, but basically they were like, content is content. Everyone is eventually going to watch this at their home on their big screen anyway. We're going to make this stuff regardless. So it's all lumped in together. So they're making, as we see now. Obviously, this was written before the pandemic, so I'm interested to see kind of how that it's obviously sped it up. But that's their argument, that all of this stuff is considered just content at this point. I think I will always go to the movie theater, but I think there's maybe a certain segment that may never go back, and so all this content and where they put it, is almost becoming irrelevant as to where they decide. I don't know. I mean, the whole Warner's thing, the whole HBO Max thing this year, it's not something anyone saw coming, but it's kind of just, the natural evolution of all this stuff being in your home.
Yeah. I mean, the draw of the cinema was always that it could give you an experience you could not get at home. And now you can get that experience at home. And the big question, I think, the existential question for, cinemas is, do people even care if they're getting the greatest experience with their content, or do they just want the content? And so I think that's the big question that has to be asked. And if you're a cinema franchise, what can you offer that someone can't get in their living room? I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's not a question they have to answer for you and me. It's a question they have to answer for our kids, or Generation Z, if you will. So it's going to be really interesting. But I think Falcon and Winter Soldier, fantastic show. I hope Buddy Cop. They hinge so much on the rapport of the two actors, so I really can't wait to see those two guys get together. And that happens in a car, you're on the way and then there's some comedy. So I wonder if that's going to happen with the Falcon picking up the Winter Soldier, in his little Falcon gear. And instead of a car, they're having their back and forth, their tit for tat in midair. That would be a revolution.
It's so fortunate that those guys he was fighting at the very beginning of that episode had the flying suits, like the wing suits, and they're just jumping out of airplanes. Pretty big, production there to your point. I mean, that was basically a movie we watched. So yeah, I like it. I'm looking forward to it. But I also really liked WandaVision. Totally different show. I liked most of everything they did there. And those are all characters that basically, if you just watch the movies, you don't care about most of them, right? I mean, the three, Wanda, Vision, or Falcon, Winter Soldier, I mean, you're not there to watch those guys in the movies.
No. I mean, they provided particular plot points, but they just, so many characters weren't given room to breathe because there was just so much to get to. Speaking of so much to get to.
One question for you, though.
Sure.
So when you're watching the MCU, the complete collection, do you, since you just watched it, would you recommend someone watch them in chronological order or in the order in which they were released? You know what I'm saying? So would you, because I think there's arguments to be made for both.
I think you watch them in order that they're released, because then you get to have the fun of figuring everything out. If you watch things in chronological order, what's the fun in that? I mean, it might be easier. It might be easier for you, but I think there's a coolness factor in going, oh yeah, that relates back to that movie, that relates back to that movie.
And
That
that's
you're
how
not
it's built.
necessarily going to feel that magic if you watch it in chronological order.
Right. Okay. We're on the same page.
That would be my take on that. My take would be don't do what I did, especially if you got like go outside. That would be my take. I shouldn't have done it, and I did it only because we can't do anything.
That's
Okay,
right.
let's get back to Hornets basketball. 2 more games to talk about. They played the Clippers, barely. That was a tough game. And, the Clippers were firing on all cylinders. They're one of the best teams in the Western Conference. Only 2. I mentioned while you were gone, David, that when they played Denver, only 1 player for Denver shot under 50%. Only 2 regular rotation players for the Clippers shot under 50%. So that just tells you all you need to know about to me, it was a defensive effort issue. It was a defensive organization issue. They just didn't have it, and LAC took advantage hard.
Yeah, the Clippers came back on the Hawks last night. I watched the tail end of that game, and I was wondering which one would be worse to lose. And I definitively say the way the Hawks did it, because they were up by, 15, 17 points in that game. And the second unit of the Clippers came back and beat them. The Hornets really just didn't show up, and it was not an interesting, fun game at all. That was not something we've seen too often, honestly, from this group. One thing I will say throughout this season is they have always pushed back. They have always at least come out swinging at some point to try and make a push. It never happened that night. And so the quicker they could forget about that one, the better. You're going to have a stinker every once in a while. If you're going to have one, you might as well have it, Lakers, Clippers back to back. And so that was just not a fun game to watch. There's not a lot of breakdown on that one.
Yeah, and obviously this was the game that Lamello got injured, and so he didn't play as many minutes as he would have normally played. I saw some people mad at Paul George for that play that he got injured on, which was kind of ridiculous to me. I mean, that was just I didn't mention this in the first segment when we talked about the Lamello injury, but now just kind of thinking back on that play, David, does any part of you look at that play and does it make your little memory grapes tingle a little bit thinking about MKG and the way that MKG would toss his body around? Because, that play, Lamello driving to the basket, just kind of flinging his body, no regard for how he was going to land, where he was going to land, what was going to happen. You love to see that effort, but we saw that effort from MKG and we saw what it did to his career.
Yeah. It looked like that just because he landed so it wasn't super violent. Lamello does everything in a kind of a smooth fashion, and he usually braces himself even when he's going to the ground. But yeah, that's, you can't help but think about MKG because that was his go-to. It was, like you said, just to throw himself up in the air, bounce off of something or someone, and then just crash down on, a bone, and hopefully it held up. But I hope, you hope Melo is young enough at this point where he can bounce back from this. You certainly think so. But yeah, that was a little bit scary. It's something they all got to watch out for, but he doesn't seem to, off the top of my head, I can't remember him having a ton of these. He's always going fast, but he's always more in control and able to kind of hold himself up a little bit better than MKG ever did.
Okay, finally, they played San Antonio last night and got a victory, 100-97, a low-scoring victory for the Charlotte Hornets. Typically, their offensive rating has to be, close to 115 to win basketball games because their defense, their inability to play defense. But they won a little bit of a slogfest, which is typically what you're going to get when you play the San Antonio Spurs and you play a Popovich team. You're going to have to be physical. You're going to have to tough it out. And they did. And a lot of that, David, thanks to Terry Rozier, who scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. He gets a second straight manual transmission award because he was super clutch in this one, just hitting bucket after bucket when the Hornets needed it most. San Antonio came out in that fourth quarter. I thought they were going to win the game. Just the first few plays, I was like, uh-oh, here we go.
Like it.
And then it was a little mixture of Rozier and I thought, Biz hit the free throws, but
Hayward came out. I mean, and
Yeah.
JB drew up some nice plays for him coming out of those timeouts. That's one thing that I've really enjoyed watching. JB is always able to seemingly get them a good look. Now it helps to have guys that can knock them down. That's a big difference, I think, in this version of the Hornets. But Terry, I mean, yeah, let's get back to him for a second because he hit some tough shots. You're talking about step back threes. You're talking about 3-pointers over people. And you're talking about do or die threes. Like if he doesn't hit those, they do not win that game. And so I expected a Patty Mills 3-pointer to come crashing down on them at any moment. And they got a couple good looks. DeRozan got inside late for a couple of buckets that he usually hits, but the Hornets just would not go away. And that was the fight that I was talking about. That's what we saw in that game. They would not let that one be lost, and a lot of it came for Terry Rozier. But then I looked up, and Gordon Hayward had 27 points. So he had a bad turnover late. Good play by San Antonio to kind of come around and steal it from him on a double team. But Terry and Gordon and PJ, it was a really good effort for most of the guys that saw the floor.
Yeah, I mean, and that just goes a little bit to my point about what Lamello was sort of transforming the team in real time and what that was doing possibly to Gordon. I think you're going to see much more production out of Gordon Hayward moving forward. But yeah, Terry Rozier, I think if he were hitting the kind of shots that he's hitting now, if he were doing that when he was like 20 years old, I think he would look at Terry and go, oh, that's a superstar in the making. But because he's doing it now and his career is pretty matured at this point, I just think there's a lot of perception around him that is still preventing people from going, oh, Rozier is pretty amazing.
Yeah, he's really
and he's not very good
go-to guy in
defensively.
the clutch.
So that kind of hurts it as well. I mean, on one side of the floor, it's tough.
Devontae sat for a pretty long stretch of the fourth and the end of that game until maybe the last 2-3 minutes when he was just trying to get more ball handlers, guys that could shoot free throws and stuff in there. I mean, that had to be a defensive thing, right? Because they had Martin out there trying to lock down, playing that kind of small ball defense, and it worked. I mean, there were a lot of good defensive plays, steals, and charges being taken that helped them win that game.
Well, and JB had it down to an 8-man rotation, so he clearly wasn't messing around. He understood the importance of that game, that they had to come away with a victory in that game to salvage that West Coast road trip, and especially coming off that Lamello injury. It was already going to take the rotation down a little bit. But he goes to the 8-man rotation. He's not messing around, and got the win over his mentor, Popovich, who looks like that Area 51 scientist in Independence Day with the long white hair. Just looks super creepy. Very scary.
He's going with it, man. Yeah, that's got to feel good for any Pop student to go in there and win a game. Of course, they all respect and love him, but that's got to feel good. And that hasn't been a very fun place for the Hornets to play a game. So for them to pull that out when it really looked like it was going to be the classic Hornet game where they were winning the whole time, the Spurs come back and crush them. That was good. That was a great win. I'm just saying that was a great win for the Hornets.
All right, let's get to another segment. Take that for data.
Take that for data.
Hornets social gains. We saw some players making some moves. Miles Bridges increased his social presence by 9,000 followers, mostly on Instagram. PJ Washington.
Birthday.
Yeah. Happy, and maybe that's it. Maybe players gain on their birthday. PJ Washington, as we said, he's at a block party as of late. He increased his social following 8.6 thousand. No one's even close to LaMelo Ball, though, despite the injury, increasing his social following about a cool 110,000 followers on Instagram and Twitter. He continues just a meteoric rise. And, obviously a little bit of that's going to be stunted by this injury, but he's going to pick up right where he left off, I'm pretty confident, next season. And then finally, just a note, Caleb Martin and Cody Martin, the twins, they both increased their following by 2,400 followers.
Look at that.
Twinsies.
That's great.
Twinsies in follower increase as well. In terms of screen time this week, no surprise for this third straight week, I think PJ Washington accumulating the most minutes, 33.5, close behind Gordon Hayward at 32.5, Terry Rozier at 32.4. There's your big three for the Hornets right now. LaMelo Ball, 25.9. That got hurt because of his injury that he probably would have been close to 30 But this is going to be your big three for the Hornets moving forward. P.J. Washington, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, and then you work in Devontae Graham back into the starting lineup, and you would expect maybe to see a little bit more of Malik Monk as well, who had 18.4 minutes this week. So there's your screen time update. Crazy stats. I only have one. The Hornets are 16-0 after that win against San Antonio when leading after 3 quarters. That's crazy because this is a team that we're just used to blowing fourth quarter or blowing third quarter leads. And they're just not doing that this season. When they're up, they're up. And that's a testament to Terry, I think, more than anyone.
Yeah. And the whole group there. So finally, that's good to see. You don't want to turn it off.
Breathe.
Doug.
You can breathe. When they're up in the third quarter, you can breathe.
Yeah.
Who had a worse week than the Hornets? This was going to be a lot tougher this week because the Hornets going 1-3 this week. So we'll try to find some people who had a worse week. David, you've got some.
Well, I think UNC basketball and Roy Williams had a pretty tough go of it.
Is he done? Is he done? Or how many years does Roy have left?
As many as he wants, I think.
Boy.
Well, listen, you come home, you give Chapel Hill 3 national championships. You can take your sweet time, I think, but he's got some stuff to figure out. And we had a transfer yesterday from former 5-star big man Walker Kessler. He'll be heading out the door.
Oh, really? I did. Oh, wow. Why?
Oh, yes. Well, that's a great question, Doug.
I thought he was the future of Carolina basketball.
Well, apparently his family had some different thoughts. Walker was a late signee, or was the last signee to Carolina. Did
they want Walker to play more this year, and he didn't get enough play time?
Yeah, I think they envisioned him in a little more of a Porzingis type mode. But for my money, he wasn't quite ready to do that until pretty much very late in the season. So whether it was it's
one of your favorite players. You're mourning right now. You're double mourning.
I was really looking forward to him because he's really
You're Alonzo
skilled.
mourning.
I think he really, really will be good for wherever he goes. I think it was a combination, Doug, of maybe not being used as had been promised in like a Luke May mold, kind of stepping outside. And also, I think he was having some success in practice against maybe some of the older players that continue to get some minutes above him. This is all pure message board conjecture. So
I love some good message board conjecture. So
yeah, but
is this going to be what? Who are the twins? Exits. Who are the twins that transferred out of Carolina?
The Ware twins.
The Ware. Is this going to be that situation where you go?
I mean, I think we'll hear from Walker Kessler again. Whereas I don't know where the Ware twins are right now, but I think his family was never fully on board. Again, conjecture on our part. With him going to Chapel Hill, I think a lot of his family played at basketball at Georgia. I don't know if that's where he'll end up, but at some point they thought it was better for Walker and his future to take his talents elsewhere. So that's what he did.
All right, here are a few more people or things that had a worse week than the Charlotte Hornets. The Big Ten, who everyone thought was just going to dominate this NCAA tournament. Ouch. Instead, the ejector button hit on so many of these teams, including Illinois, who a lot of people had slated to win the whole darn thing. They get bounced. I think the Big Ten had a worse week than the Charlotte Hornets.
Are you watching? You watching tourney, Doug?
A little bit here and there. I'm watching teams that I have friends that I care, but I'm not watching a ton because this whole college basketball season just seems a wash to me.
Yeah. It needs to end.
It needs to end very quickly. I'm going to give a who had a worse week than the Hornets to anyone who lives in Australia. I saw this article on HuffPost. Swarms of snakes and spiders flee toward homes to escape Australia floods. So record rains have led to floods, which mean that mice, spiders, and snakes, swarms of these rodents and spiders and snakes are making their way into people's houses. And if you look at these images, they're just clusters of spiders moving towards people's houses. This is just the most frightening thing I can possibly think of. And yeah, they've got tweets here about just like thousands of spiders moving through people's houses. This is absolutely absurd. Never go to Australia. Sorry to my friend Josh Lloyd and Kane Pittman from the Locked On Network who broadcast from Australia. They might tell you the same thing.
Well, look
Also,
on the bright side, Lamello, you don't live in Australia anymore.
yeah, I know. Got out just in time. Also had a worse week than the Hornets. Donald Trump's wax statue in Texas. I don't know if you saw this story, David, but he had a wax figure in Texas. They had to move it. It's one of these like Tussauds waxwork kind of attractions in San Antonio. They had to move it because people kept punching it in the face. Which,
okay.
In Texas. I think it's surprising that even
where
Texas,
do they move it to the basement of the Alamo?
Yeah, exactly to
Okay.
Loserville. So let's move on now to our final segment where we hand out some medals before we get out of here. David, you're responsible for the medals this week: gold, silver, and bronze. This was a tougher week than usual. I think it was pretty clear the past 2 weeks that we've done this. This is a little bit more iffy. What do you got?
Well, strong finish last night, but we talked about this guy all show. Terry Rozier, just what he's become in the
second
clutch
straight,
is undeniable. Yeah, at this point. So for me, it's got to be Terry because he led them over the finish line in San Antonio last night and has become the go-to guy in the clutch for the Hornets. So that's the gold medal, Terry Rozier.
Silver medal, you've got JB.
I got JB, Doug. I mean, I continue to, like I said, to be impressed with some of the stuff he's drawing up out of timeouts, the way they're able to score on inbounds possessions. They had several inbounds possessions last night that were critical to winning that game, and they managed to not only get them inbounds, not turn it over, not kick it, not get a 5-second call. It went off without a hitch.
Well, and I think the narrative in this show is much different if the Hornets get blown out by the Spurs than it is now when they get the 3-point win. I just think we're starting to question a lot of things at that point. Are they going to come off the rails? So at least for a time, JB and company have staved off that kind of talk.
Finally, bronze medal for me. I'm going with PJ Washington. I just have been
B for bronze, B for block.
Yeah. Oh man, that block on Keldon Johnson, who of course went to Kentucky. Like I didn't know where he went to college, but then they mentioned it last night. So of course he also went to Kentucky.
Meow.
But PJ came up on him. That's right, and blocked what would have been I don't know at the time. It was either a tying or go ahead or margin closing layup or dunk. And on the other end, previously PJ had a tough finish of his own. So he's been really well. He's been playing really well, Doug. I've been impressed with just his consistency over the last, 2 weeks or so. So PJ Washington, if they can get some more play like that out of him to finish the season, I think it's really encouraging moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to argue with any of those. And I think I was really impressed with PJ's ability to get those blocks. I mean, he's averaging 2 blocks over the last, or more than 2 blocks, almost 2.5 blocks over the last 4 games this past week. So I think that's fine to slot him in the bronze. I like the JB analysis there. The one player that I would make an argument for to climb into this top 3, but I don't think he quite got there, was Devontae Graham, who was a double-digit scorer off the bench and then, going back into the starting role against San Antonio, but he's shooting 42% from the field, 43% from 3 on almost 6 attempts. So really efficient scoring the basketball. And now we'll see, as he's slotted into the starting role, can he pick up where he left off last season, where he was not only scoring, but he was doing a lot of the facilitating. Like that's, Devontae is going to have to pick up that slack left by Lamello Ball in terms of facilitating for Gordon and Terry and PJ as well.
Yeah, and I think if he would have gotten a little more run in that second half last night, maybe would have stuck in that bronze medal slot. But he came on strong, hit some threes coming out of the gate, and looked really good. I mean, I was thinking Devontae back during that first half. And I think he took all 3-pointers, if I do remember correctly. I don't know if he took any shots inside the arc.
We don't need no stinking twos.
But that's going to be big as they close out the season. I don't know if he'll try and cobble together a Monk
Need more from
Devontae,
that guy,
some
too. We need Monk to win a
combination.
medal
Yeah,
at some
he's got to
point.
get back. Yeah, he's got to get back to that consistent play we saw earlier.
And I mean that, like, obviously people who've listened to Locked on Hornets know that I've been kind of down on Monk, but at the same time, like, I've been impressed with Monk this season, but he's got to pick it up right now. Like, right now. With Lamello gone, he's going to have more opportunities. He's going to have more touches. He's got to pick it up right now if the Hornets have a shot at being any kind of first-round threat in the playoffs. It's really like this, to me, it's now or never for him.
Well, it could be the last chance, right? Last good look.
Yeah. All right. That's the last thing that we're going to do on this show. We're making it up as we go along, David, but it's only going to get better. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, for supporting us on patreon.com/HornetsPod. For David, I'm Doug saying, go Hornets, go America. Let's swarm Charlotte. Bye-bye.